I wish. So, Sally, please.
Okay, so I'm glad to see all of you who could make it. And for those of you who will be watching the recording, thank you for watching the recording as well. So we are, okay, do we have the slides?
Yeah, just give me a second.
Okay, so we are going to be looking at reading and listening today. And we have two skill areas. So it was really a challenge for me to think about, decide what to share with you today. And I'm sure that some of it is not new because we have a group of veteran teachers here. But as always, if you can think of something that you would like information on, I have huge files and I'm a collector. So I have lots of articles on teaching, reading, and listening. And I also have lots of activities. And so if there's something you can think of that you would like, just send me a message and I will be happy to send that to you. So that said, we're going to start with going over some of the important points to remember about teaching, reading, and listening. And some of this was Marina covered in the videos. The videos were very comprehensive on these two skills, but I'll try to pull out some of these really important points to remember and try to add something to them. Since we have such a small group, if you have any questions along the way, please feel free to ask. But one thing we should keep in mind is that reading experts agree that one of the best ways to help students improve their reading is to explicitly teach reading strategies. And you heard about, you heard this in the videos with skimming and scanning. So experts say we should build activities to encourage our students to skim quickly through a text and or to get the gist, or to scan the text for specific information. It's good to encourage our students to underline or highlight keywords, phrases, and ideas. And it's good to teach them how to take notes, annotate, or use graphic organizers to sort out their ideas. Now, backing up just a little bit, when I was teaching at Hawaii Pacific University, I taught students, our program had the 4 skills: reading, writing, listening, speaking. So I taught in that program. I also taught in the TESOL program, TESOL majors. But students would often say to me, oh my gosh, especially when they left the ESL courses, in my major classes, the professor asked us to read 100 pages in one night. And that's one class. Then there's another class where I have to read 50 pages. And there's this class, I can't do it. I'm overwhelmed. I can't do it. And I have to remind them, well, you remember how to skim? If your textbook is if it's a nonfiction, well-written textbook, then the main idea should be in the first sentence of every paragraph. The main ideas should be in the first sentence of every paragraph. So I also remind them, actually before the skimming, I remind them, did your professor give you an assignment? Does the reading have questions at the end? If so, read those first. Read over the questions. Read the assignment, because then you will have an idea of how to focus your reading. You'll have an idea of what the professor thinks is important. Then You've got 100 pages. Don't just say, I can't do it, and don't do it. No. If nothing else, skim the first sentence of every paragraph, because that should have the main idea. And then think about the questions that your professor asked or that the textbook asks, and scan for that information. Those are the ways you want to use these two very important skills. So we have to remind them, not just, not just tell them this is a good skill, but why is it a good skill? Again, helping them see how not to look up every word, but to maybe highlight it and keep reading. And if they get stuck, to look it up later, or to make some kind of graphic organizer or a map. And again, I have this huge collection of graphic organizers for different, rhetorical patterns, comparison, contrast, description. Anyway, if you want graphic organizers, just shoot me a message and I can send you that handout full of graphic organizers. Okay, so these are some things we want to keep in mind about reading. Let's take a look at listening. Okay. Listening, the research tells us that listening takes up to 40 to 50% of the total time spent communicating. Yet, historically, many language programs didn't pay much attention to listening. Speaking takes 25 to 30%, reading 11 to 16, and writing about 9. Given the fact that listening takes up the majority of our communications, listening should be taught. Now, again, I think for very young learners, we can do a lot of activities with them, songs, total physical response, a lot of things where they will just start comprehending. But as our students grow older, get older, we need to actually give them some explicit training. And that includes training in predicting. And that's always easy with listening. We can tell them the topic. What do you think this might be about? We can play a recording or read the script and stop at key places and ask them to predict what they think will happen. So predicting and inferencing. Okay, what is a sentence implying? What do you think the meaning is here? It's not directly stated, but what do you think? So these are two skills that are very important for listening. We also want to teach our students to recognize and interpret linguistic signals, and this is especially true in academic classes. If they have lectures, these signal words are so important. For example, okay, on the other hand, oh, I'm getting two ideas here, two contrasting ideas, or in comparison, two contrasting ideas. My professor is stressing a word, really hitting that word, or pausing. Voice is rising. What does all of this mean? These are all words or linguistic signals that our listeners, that when we listen, we need to pay attention to because they carry meaning, lots of meaning. And we also want to draw attention to paralinguistic clues like gestures, facial expressions, and variation in voice quality. And I think this is a good reason for us to try to bring in some video, or to try to bring in live speakers, or to even do it ourselves and let students make that a focus of a lesson. What do these paralinguistic clues mean? And on the other hand, I tell my students, if you are a good listener, you are going to give the speaker clues. You need to nod, or you need to put a question mark on your face. And I used to tell like really beginning level students, you know, to say, do you have a question? They kind of, they sit there, they don't want to ask a question in front of the whole class. That's very frightening. So I say, put a question mark on your face. And they laugh, but then they do. They kind of look at me and they go, hmm? And so then I know that they didn't understand. So we need to let our students know what are the clues you can give speakers in this language that are appropriate for letting the speaker know you don't understand, or that, okay, I'm following what you're saying. Or maybe, excuse me, could you say that again? Or excuse me, do you mean? So we need to give listeners all of this, you know, what they need to look for when they're listening to the speaker, but also what they need to do so that the speaker can understand how much they are catching of what is being said. So all these things we want to keep in mind as we go over reading and listening. Okay. Okay, this I think is probably familiar to most of you. Best practices show that teachers can help their students improve their reading and listening skills by developing lessons in 3 parts: pre, during, and post. Now, of course, I understand that you may not be teaching a skills class per se, but if you do have a reading passage or a listening passage, and that is part of your lesson for the day, to create, and this was, Marina went over this in the videos, that we want a pre-activity, pre-reading or pre-listening to introduce or prepare the students for the new content they will read or hear. That could be what? Let me ask you, since we're moving along here fairly quickly, let me ask you to put in the box. What are some pre-reading activities you remember mentioned in the video or that you do in your classes?
Yeah, we can just share, even if you want to write, or we can just share. Yeah, if there are any activities that like you feel, you know, as far as I teach, like I either teach theoretical courses to older students or like to young adults, or I teach kids here. And with kids, we always use bottom-up approach. We listen just phrase by phrase, and we add up. And probably we start with the 7th grade when we start doing this pre-reading and pre-listening activities, not before. And then they include everything. If it's pre-reading, it's looking at the title of the text, looking at the picture for this text, predicting and like any kind of activity that will activate their schemata and that will help them, like that will introduce them to this kind of reading. And as for the listening, like probably you have ideas about the pre-listening activities.
Anybody like to share?
I think they are almost the same. So we have to look at the heading if we have one. If we have pictures, of course, we get them looking at those pictures and try to get the idea of what predicting the gist of the text. And of course, we usually have a number of new words, and maybe we'll try to introduce those words to them and making some vocabulary activities before reading or listening something new.
Yeah, thank you for that, the comment about pictures. I mean, if you have a passage on Kathmandu and, you know, your students have no real knowledge of Kathmandu, you probably want a map to show them where they are, and you want some pictures of Nepal to really help students. I think we know that things we've read about already or have seen are just so much easier. When we hear something else, when we hear news on the radio, we can, oh yes, I can imagine that place. Okay, so that's great too. The visual aspect is very important in the pre-reading or pre-listening. Thank you.
And may I add something from another course, like from Ruslana Westerlund's course that I feel is very good for reading. So she, you know, that she preaches systemic functional linguistics.
Right.
And the approach or the pedagogy, which is very close to it, is called genre-based approach. Yeah? So, and it says that every text has a peculiar genre. And you need to define this genre of the text. And I tried it and I really like it because let me share the idea with you. The idea is that, just give me a second. It's here, yeah. So it's with this YouTube video, or like you can Google it about genre-based approach. And the idea is that you deconstruct the text altogether, like with the whole class. You deconstruct the text and you see what genre it belongs to, what are the linking words, what the structure is. Then you make a joint construction in class of the same kind of genre. For example, compare and contrast, or just any scientific genre. And then independent construction comes. So then the students can create their own texts. And that's what I tried with my students as a part of reading. And I found it very useful, especially as Natalia, she has ESP students. And it's not only about reading, it's also about understanding the academic structure of the text. And so, my advice when you teach ESP, when you teach technical students, so probably one of the approaches can be this, when you deconstruct together, and then you construct something new. And that is how you have receptive, productive moments, and you even like have this teamwork when you together construct a new structure. So it's like, for me, it was new, and probably if you Google it, you will find more about it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And I see some comments in the chat box. And I think we've covered most of those. Discussion on the topic beforehand, brainstorming, mind mapping the topic, discussion questions. So what we already know about the topic, yes, that's very important. What do you know about this topic, and brainstorm that, and very likely we'll cover something in the reading or the listening. Great. Okay, so that's the pre-activity. The during, we are reminded that if we are actually teaching reading or listening, we need multiple meetings with that reading text or with the listening passage. If we do it once and ask students to respond to questions, that's a test. So you know, sometimes my TESOL students would say, well, but then of course they can get it. If you're doing it multiple times, but that's not the point is not to get it in one listening. The point is to listen for just the first time. The second time, perhaps a different task. They're listening for more details. And then the third time to fill in the blanks that we're still missing after the first and second listening, so that you have a task that gets a little more specific or detailed each time. Sure, you can test, but first you need to teach. And then finally, the post activity, the post reading or post listening, which could include comprehension questions, but it could include some kind of activity that builds on what was read or listened to, some kind of evaluation of the activity by the readers or the listeners. And I'd like to point out a tool. I don't know, are you familiar with Barrett's taxonomy? Barrett's taxonomy of cognitive and affective dimensions of, well, you can back up one more slide, Maria.
I thought I can share the.
But that's different. So, okay. So this Barrett's taxonomy in a way reminds me a little bit of Bloom's taxonomy, but it is a taxonomy of cognitive and affective dimensions of reading comprehension. And you can find various versions. I think this one I like the best. That's why I put the link there. But this tool was originally designed to assist teachers in developing questions around different levels of comprehension skills. And so it covers, what I really like about it, it has a list of literal comprehension skills, reorganization skills, inferential comprehension skills, evaluation skills, and appreciation skills. There you go. Thank you. Oh, is that the one I sent you? That's not the one I wanted. Oh, well, this is okay.
It looks perfect. Look at it. So
okay.
It's just the comprehension, reorganization, and evaluation, appreciation.
So what I like about that is you can use this as a checklist. You know, you don't want to just stay at level 1. You want to challenge your students to be more critical thinkers, more critical readers. And so you can use this as a checklist. And then Bloom has the sentence stems for asking questions about these comprehension skills. So I love these sentence stems, especially, you know, as a reminder, am I asking these kinds of questions? And if you're training teachers and they're not so confident about asking these types of questions, they have the stems right here so they can pull them out and kind of fill in the blanks with the reading material. So this, I think, is a very helpful tool for follow-up for that post-reading stage when you're discussing this with your students or having them discuss it among themselves. And I don't think, so I sent you this one, Marina?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. So there's a link on the slide, and that is a little, I mean, it's the same taxonomy, but it's not the one that Marina just showed you. So you can look at them both. This one is a little longer, and but anyway, you can look at the two of them and use whichever one you find more user-friendly, actually.
I love the one that you sent. So,
okay.
And now, because it's very concise, it's short and very comprehensible. And let me share the one that you have the link to. Yeah, so it looks like this, and it's longer. Yeah,
Yes.
There are 25 pages and
But it's a lot of, it's like this. So 25 pages, it's not heavy text. Well, this one has a little more explanation. So it's just which you prefer, but you will have both with the link and with the handout. So.
And this one has more examples.
Yes.
On how to ask. Yeah, sure. We'll need both. Yeah.
Okay, so I think that's a very worthwhile tool to take a look at if you're not familiar with it. And again, if you're training teachers, to share with them. Okay. Finally, on to point 4, to remember. And this was something from the early videos that, according to Krashen, we acquire language in only one way, by understanding messages or obtaining comprehensible input in a low anxiety situation. Now, what our students read and listen to in class depends, of course, on the requirements, on their level, on their majors. And I think in many cases, this reading or listening is not always that comprehensible. And perhaps the classroom situation is a bit stressful. They're with peers, and if they have to answer questions, they're answering in front of peers or maybe in pair work or group work. But Krashen's statement doesn't always fit the classroom teaching situation. So what does? Let's take a look at the next slide. One approach to reading, and it's an approach to listening too, although much more has been written and done with the reading aspect. And that approach is extensive reading. And is that something that has been talked about a lot in Ukraine with teaching? It's very, very popular in Asia.
You know, we usually have like home reading.
Home reading.
I mentioned it last time. Yeah, so we usually have home reading, but it's not an easy reading. It's usually like very often authentic literature. Yeah.
Okay, I was going to ask about that because I remember my students had home reading at Vinica Pedagogical Institute or University now. But this idea of extensive reading is now called a reading approach, and a lot has been written about it. There is an extensive reading foundation. They have international conferences. They have a website, which you see on the bottom, that has a lot of things on it. So I consider that a tool as well. If you're interested in this idea, really do go to the website and explore it when you have power. Yeah, because I'm sorry, but there's a lot on that site, including some free materials, free reading materials. And I think every year they have some kind of competition and a teacher can win books. I have to look at it more carefully, but this is, you can see they're having their 6th. And one reason I know as much as I do about this is because one of the founders and one of the leaders of extensive reading is Dr. Richard Day from the University of Hawaii. Marina, did you meet him at any of our conferences? He is one of the leaders of this. Or he was, he has now retired from University of Hawaii, but he and several others in Japan started this foundation, this organization. And so, yeah, so there's a lot on the list, and somewhere I did see some free books, but you can look over that more on your own, I guess. And then there are journals too for online reading. online journals that have articles on reading. These are publishers that publish graded readers. Yeah. So these are all.
Yeah. So that's a great idea. Yeah.
Okay, so this idea, if we go back here, so what these founders of this reading approach, extensive reading approach, they divide reading into intensive reading and extensive reading. And the intensive reading is usually what takes place in the classroom. Although if you talk to some of the founders of this approach, if you talk to Dr. Day, they will say that extensive reading should take place in the classroom too. But I know many of you are like me and you say, we don't have enough time. Our time is limited and maybe we have a big class, so it's impossible to do two kinds of reading in class. And I am required by my department, by my students' majors, their skills to do intensive reading. And sometimes that intensive reading is hard. So it goes against Krashen's idea. Sometimes it's limited. Maybe it's just a passage, or maybe it's a short story of a couple of pages. We, or our department chair, usually chooses what they read in that class or at that level. It's to practice reading. And they might learn some vocabulary and improve their skills. I mean, that's our goal as teachers, teaching reading in the class. After they skim and scan, they will probably read it slowly and carefully. And it's done as a class usually, or it's done for class and then discussed in class. And students are familiar with this. This is a typical reading class or reading activity. On the other hand, extensive reading, you might say it's just the opposite. The reading material is easy. It's a variety of reading material on a wide range of topics. And they would, these adherents to extensive reading would say that ideally the teacher should have a wide range of reading materials in class that students can check out or read if there is free time left in class. However, that again, we know is not always possible. But I do have to add here, my undergraduate degree is in French and Spanish, but when I was studying French in high school, it was impossible. We didn't have the internet, right? And in the area where I live, even though there's French influence and Belgian influence, we didn't have any French reading materials or French listening materials. Sometimes I would turn on a radio and try to listen to a station in Canada, but I could barely hear it. But my teacher, my high school teacher, had a subscription to a French magazine, and she had lots of French records. And she was very generous because she brought them and put them on a table in the back of the class, and she told us we could check them out. I later taught high school French, and I was not going to share my records with students, but she did. She brought those records and magazines to class and let us check them out. And I checked something out every week, and I'll tell you, that's one of the reasons I decided to major in French. I just fell in love listening to that music, even though I couldn't understand half of it. And looking at those magazines and the ads, and I just became enamored of French. So, you know, things are much different now, but I can say from personal experience what having I mean, our textbooks didn't have any magazine articles. We were beginning level students. Our listenings were just awful. They were like, I can still recite, hello, this is passive 25 to 15. And, you know, these dialogues that you're never going to use in your life. So listening to the records and trying to pull out words just really inspired me. So that's my personal story as to why we should have things other than just textbook reading or listening passages. But another thing with extensive reading or extensive listening is that learners get to choose what they want to read. It's not the teacher saying you have to read this. They can choose. Could be a cookbook, could be a comic book. It could be a magazine on cars. But they should read as much as possible on any topic they want, and they should read for pleasure because they want to read about this. Reading is its own reward, and they will probably read faster because they don't have to, you know, they're not required to have a test on the vocabulary from the reading or the listening passage. It's individual and silent. They do it by themselves. And typically the teacher should explain all of this to the student, how they're going to go about doing this, and show them some materials, whether they be reading or listening. And if you do it in class, the teacher should also be reading something in class when the students are reading. So again, this is another approach to reading and listening, which, based on my experience that I just told you about being inspired with French, I believe there's a lot of validity in this. But like I think most of you, when do I do this? Where do I get the time? But I have come up with ideas as to how to do that. Just Marina talked about home reading. So, okay. So, wow, I've been talking a lot. You've been listening a lot. Let's take a quick break.
Such a pleasure to listen to you.
Thank you, but let's take a quick brain break. Okay, stretch your arms. Stretch your arms. Is everybody stretching arms? Clap your hands. Wiggle your fingers. Okay, let's stand. Okay, please sit down. One more time. Stretch your arms.
Oh, I wanted to stand.
Clap your hands. Wiggle your fingers. Let's stand. Okay, thank you. Let's sit down. That's an example of a brain break. And if you remember back a few sessions ago, we talked about movement in class. And a lot of people wrote, I don't think I can do that, or maybe I'll try it when we meet face to face. But I think if we're online a long time, we need a little break.
Absolutely.
And we need to move our bodies. So last week we had, wow. Now, these are what we call brain breaks. You just take a minute or two and you move. This is movement. Maybe not what you were thinking of when we talked about movement in the classroom, but this is a form of movement. And so, and I have lots of brain breaks. I have a list of articles written about brain breaks if you want them. Wow. And today's, I just made those up. Just made them up as an example of movement of a brain break first. Let's take a little break, and of movement we can do at the computer. And depending on the students of your, depending on the level of your students, I mean, if you have young learners, you could do almost the whole alphabet if you contort your body in enough ways. And maybe for little older students, do they know the word stretch? Do they know clap? Do they know wiggle? They probably know stand, but I don't know if they know stretch, clap, wiggles. So besides getting a break, they're getting some vocabulary, TPR. Yeah. Okay, so that's just a little example of how we can use movement. Okay, let's go on to the next slide. Okay, 2 questions for you. This was going to be for our breakout rooms. I don't know if we want to do breakout rooms or what today.
We can try for 5 minutes.
Okay, well, okay, so how important is it to engage students in a discussion of the strategies they or their classmates utilize while reading or listening, and why? And how can we help our students gain more reading and listening practice? Think about extensive reading and listening. Okay, let's talk about those a little bit and then come back together.
Okay, here, so I'm pausing the video and I'm doing the groups. Just wonderful. They all joined the rooms.
Okay.
Sally, everything is perfect, I tell you.
Well, I think we work well together. You came in at the right places, and I was looking at my watch thinking, oh my gosh, this is going to be a 20-minute session. But you
ask them, they could also talk, but
right.
There is no feeling that many of them will talk, and you know, now they will talk together and tell us it's better to do it after the breakout rooms. Yeah. So, okay, now we have a couple of minutes plan. Yeah? 3 more sessions.
Okay.
1 on productive skills, 1 on classroom management, and 1 on assessment.
Okay.
Yeah? What do you think? Or assessment and classroom management for 1 session?
It's up to you.
It looks like it has to be 3. Like,
okay.
Yeah?
Okay.
Either 3 or 2. Let's see how it goes, how next class goes.
Okay.
Yeah, and probably we can combine assessment and classroom management, which is pretty close. And then we'll do this asynchronous, we'll leave the course, the whole packed course, till the end of the academic year. Okay. Because many people said that they don't have time now, but they will have time later. Okay. And I'll keep the Google Forms and we'll keep everything. And then at the end of the academic year, we'll give the certificates. Okay? Okay. Sounds good. Yeah, for me as well, because so many people were worried that we won't give them a chance to complete the course. And I said, like, we can check your answers in May. It's totally fine. Yeah. Okay. After Ukrainian victory. That's right. then everyone will be excited and people will start working. And you know, in Ukrainian universities, you have to report at the end of the academic year. And that's why I think that most of our participants will complete the answers somewhere in April.
Okay.
Okay, I'm closing the rooms. Yeah.
Okay.
Mhm.